Okay, response to Qntkka, however you pronounce that.
Many of the arguments made for antinatalism are irrational and illogical. But this can be explained as an extension of the irrational and illogical thought processes of the people who make the arguments for antinatalism. Emotionally damaged and socially inept.
Whatever.
The antinatalists may cling to their philosophy as it offers them status and validity in the culture of victimocracy. Make no mistake, antinatalists believe that they are victims. And being...
Well, yeah. And you say we're not victims because...
such that identify with victims of life's cruelest circumstances.
And what's wrong with that?
The antinatalists believe that they have been victimized by their parents, who have imposed life on them, and by a society that encourages the imposition of life.
Yeah, and you're going to counter that somehow, somewhere?
And suffering. While there may be varying degrees of adherence to the philosophy, this monologue is meant to address antinatalist fundamentalists who hold the most extreme belief systems. As previously mentioned, antinatalist fundamentalists believe that they are victims of their parents and society.
You're just going to repeat yourself? You're going to actually say something here, right, that counters the antinatalist argument?
They believe that life is an imposition and that life and the physical world are worthless.
I don't think anybody's used the word worthless. I've used the word futile. It's just suffering for no good reason. Worthless might work without worth. Worth being excellence or character of quality, as commanding esteem. No, yeah, that does. I wouldn't use that to talk about this game of life. Useful or importance as to the world, to the person, or for a purpose. Well, yeah, there is no purpose. It's just suffering for no good reason. So, I guess worthless works.
Despite the fact that antinatalist fundamentalists believe that life has no value, they claim to care for the well-being of other sentient and sapient life forms. In stark contrast...
Let's see, you're using saying it has no value. I mean, sentient beings have value because they can be harmed. I think you're stretching it to say life has no value. It's like you're almost making us out to be nihilists. I would say the antinatalist could be a nihilist when it comes to meaning, but when it comes to value, there is value. As you're going to point out, it's a negative. It's suffering. We're brought into life. We suffer. We satisfy needs that didn't need to exist in order to stay alive, and then we die.
To their childish statement that the world is shit, they claim to care for plant and animal life.
Plant and animal life? No, plants aren't sentient.
To further confuse their philosophy, antinatalists claim to hold no religious beliefs. Yet they
we just claim it, right?
State that the DNA molecule is using or gaming them to the purpose of procreation, which in turn continues the life of the DNA molecule.
Yeah, and the DNA molecule is an actual thing. We've discovered the DNA molecule. We're not pulling something out of our ass. Okay, the DNA molecule is real. It's replicating, and we're the vessel for the DNA molecule. How is that a religion?
In their atheistic beliefs, antinatalists deny the possibility and or fantasy of life after death.
And you don't?
Separately, all aspects of antinatalist philosophy are logically acceptable to a point. But when all aspects are combined, the belief system falls apart. Since antinatalism is a cult of victimocracy and victim worship.
Victim worship. Now wait a second. Let's look at that word worship. You're trying to make it seem like you're trying to use these religious words on the reverent honor and homage paid to God. No, that's not it. Formal or ceremonious rendering of such honor and homage. Adoring reverence or regard. See, adoring is we regard other sentient beings because they can be harmed, just like the antinatalists can be harmed. The adoring, adoring. To regard with the utmost esteem, love, and respect, honor. No, we're just recognizing. It's just a recognition that sentient beings are being harmed for no good reason.
Philosophy relies heavily on the concept of negative value. Negative values, while always false by reason of value definition, nevertheless serve as a crutch to support the fallacy that life is worthless.
Well, it's futile. You know, the word worthless, I don't think I've heard anybody say that, but you know, life is futile. We're brought into the world, we suffer. Again, you're going to make me repeat myself. We satisfy needs that didn't need to exist in order to stay alive, and then we die. Life is futile. And yes, I mean, do you think suffering has a positive value? You know, explain that. And all this stuff you got playing, this video, I mean, that's worthless. What you got playing in the background here. Might as well be a blank screen.
The argument for antinatalism cannot stand without the use of a value-negative system, as there are clearly too many logical inconsistencies when the word value is used correctly. Let's review what we know now.
Well, how is explain how the word value is used correctly.
Antinatalist inconsistencies. 1. Procreation is the imposition of life.
Yeah.
2. The imposition of life is the imposition of suffering.
Yeah.
3. Life is worthless.
No, life is futile. That's the word you should be using.
4. The world is worthless. 5.
Well, the world is a world of hurt, of harm, of death. For no reason. That's why it's futile.
5. There is no God.
What's wrong with saying there is no God? I mean, you get...
6. There is no life after death.
As far as we know.
7. Suffering has a value.
Suffering what?
Solution. Stop procreation and let the human race go extinct.
Yeah. If we stop procreating and and the human race, really all sentient life goes extinct, there will be no more suffering. There's no suffering going on Mars. Only place you're going to have suffering is with sentient beings. The only time you're going to have problems is with sentient beings. Procreation just creates need, doesn't need to exist. It just creates a problem that didn't need to be a problem. There's no good reason to procreate. That's what you need. That's the only counter you can really have, is to give an argument for why it's a good idea to procreate, which I don't think you did.
To counter the argument for antinatalism, we must first attack the language. I will start with the negative value reference. By definition, all values are positive.
Oh, where did you get that from? All values are positive. Value. Relative worth, merit, or importance. Relative worth, merit, or importance. Monetary, nope. The worth of something in terms of the amount of the other things for which it can be exchanged in terms of some medium or exchange. Equivalent worth or return in money, materials, services, etc. Well, see, I guess here we go. I mean, if you had, it can't. I mean, it is a negative value. I mean, suffering sucks. I mean, I don't know where I got the very first one, relative worth. So, relative worth. Something having or standing in some relation to something else. Yeah, if you look at pleasure and suffering, suffering has a negative value. So, I mean, where are you getting that from? That all value is positive. Where are you getting that?
Value indicates worth, wealth,
relative worth,
health, and beauty.
Beauty. I don't know where you're getting that.
Therefore, value is not applicable to suffering.
Yes, it is, because you left out the key word, relative worth.
Suffering is a condition, not a value. Suffering is not a value, and suffering has no value in any context.
Has no value in any context. So, when somebody is suffering, we can just say, oh, it's nothing. That person is suffering, that's nothing. Right? Is that what you're saying? Suffering is nothing, has no value, relative value, positive, negative.
Next, I will attack the accusation of imposition. Life cannot be imposed on a non-existent entity.
Well, see, that's what the antinatalist is trying to say. That's the Benatara asymmetry. A non-existent being cannot be harmed. The imposition occurs when you bring a new life into being. That's the imposition.
Life can be brought into being, but it can never be imposed.
That is almost a contradiction in terms. It can be brought into being, but it can't be imposed. I mean, when you bring someone into being, you're forcing that person into existence. You're forcing them into life. That life is being imposed upon the new being.
Next, I shall address the charge that life is suffering. Life can be many things and to make the claim that life is just suffering.
I don't think anybody said life is just suffering. They say suffering is the thing that has worth. That's the only thing that has worth. Pleasure is nothing compared to suffering. I use the argument that's been used before. If you had some money to buy something, would you buy yourself some pleasure, whatever that may be, or would you buy the prevention of cancer in your neighbor's child? Which of those two do you buy? And that will tell you which one has the more relative value. I would purchase the prevention of suffering before I'd buy pleasure for me. I'd prevent someone else's suffering before I had pleasure for me. If you say you'd buy the pleasure before you prevent suffering, then I'll just say you're an asshole.
It's a clear case of lying through omission. And if antinatalists wish to be taken...
Even in Benatar's book, he talks about pleasure being, it's a good thing, but you can't say that, oh, I bought myself a hot fudge sundae, I'm a good person, right? No, you're a good person if you prevent suffering of somebody else, but you're not necessarily a good person because you bought yourself a hot fudge sundae.
Seriously, they should not have to lie to support their flimsy philosophy.
Well, see, you're projecting, you're the one lying. That's all you do is you lie. You misparaphrase, and that was just a lie. Nobody says that life is just suffering. We're saying that there is suffering, and it's imposed.
Also, antinatalists claim that the experience of love is purely chemical.
You're going to say it's not?
Well, they insist that suffering is
Well, suffering's chemical too. It's all chemical. We're a biochemical machine. But the suffering is something you try to avoid. But yet it's going to come your way whether you like it or not. Pleasure only comes if you like it.
Next, the assertion that we are being controlled, used, or gained by the DNA molecule is willfully stupid, as we are the DNA, and the DNA...
Well, we're more than just the DNA. The DNA is what that's what we're based on. Our genetic code is based on the DNA molecule. It's what makes it so that we are the way we are. Yeah, we are more than just the DNA molecule, but it is the DNA molecule that is the cause.
Is us. Even worse is the suggestion that the DNA rules us with a hive mentality while denying it has agency.
I didn't quite catch what you said, but yeah, we're not saying the DNA molecule has agency. We're saying the DNA molecule has no intelligence. It just came up, arose from crude forces, and the rest is history. All the suffering that went on for these, well, we have 500 million years of predator and prey. And it all started back 4 billion years ago when the DNA molecule showed up on the scene.
The statement that the world is shit or the world is useless exists in contrast to suffering has value.
No, it doesn't. The game of life itself is futile. But within that game of life, you got valuable commodities in the form of sentient beings that can be harmed. I don't know how much simpler I can make that. And the only reason they're sentient beings is because we're procreating. We can stop procreating and therefore stop the unnecessary harm being done to sentient beings.
If suffering and sentience and sapience have value, then the world has value.
No, the world is futile. There's valuable commodities within the world, but the game itself is futile. It's pointless. There's no reason for us to be doing all this crap.
Antinatalists ignore this glaring inconsistency. If there is no God, no heaven, no afterlife, and the world is shit, then there is no reason to be an antinatalist.
Yes, there is. There's every reason to be an antinatalist. Stop procreating. You stop procreating, you stop the suffering and the death. I mean, if the world is shit, why would we recommend keeping it going?
Because nothing matters. Nothing at all.
That's not true. Their sentient beings matter. God. You really don't understand the antinatalist argument. I mean, you're misparaphrasing, you're calling us liars when you're the liar. So, enough of the video, I guess.